What sort of 5-year-old were you? How did you get on with your mother? What was your father like? What was it like at school? When did you first have sex? The chair.
I was absolutely gobsmacked when he told me that they were actually sacking me. Money is paramount in a lot of people's lives, and it's very, very important. And a lot of it really it sort of like makes a lot of decisions for people, and people will do a lot of things for it.
What sort of a boy were you?
Well, probably get a little pair of sandals on, which were, you know, full of holes, and a little pair of trousers full of patches, probably a little dirty face, and she's come off the streets outside, probably with a little football in my hand or a little tennis ball or something. That would be what I'd be like walking into my home. But playing football until my mother used to shout out the window. Now it's getting dark. It's in Scotland. It gets dark at 11 o'clock in the summer, and 11:30. You've got to go to school in the morning, but I'd be out with my little chums playing out in the streets football.
And you lived in a mining village 8 miles from Glasgow.
It was a footballing area, and you must remember within that area, you know, in the mining villages, Shankly came from a mining village. Matt Busby didn't live far away from us. He came from another mining village.
That's amazing, isn't it? So it's a
amazing.
very strong culture. Were you aware of that at the time? If you actually, I was wanting to make a list of all those managers and say how many within that 20-mile radius between them. Probably they won 17, 20
Yeah.
of the last 30 league titles.
Yeah, Dalglish, Ferguson, myself.
Because you were the youngest of 7. Your father died of TB 3 weeks before your birth.
No, he died. I was born
After your birth?
I was born on the 30th of November, and my father died on the following Christmas Day.
And how do you think? Has people told you how that might have affected your mother? Because it must have been very upsetting for her.
Oh, can you imagine? I mean, working in a very working class community and being widowed, you know, with 7 children to look after. You don't have time to be depressed. You know, you've just sort of got on and survive. The main thing is to feed and clothe, and this she did magnificently. And this is why we took on having 3 brothers. I used to get all my clothes passed down from brother to brother until they came to me. She didn't have enough time to get depressed. She was too busy with us, and also actually earning money to feed us. So she not only sort of like did all the household chores, she actually went out to work as well. Mum's normal day would be to be up very early, get the younger children prepared for school, and nursery school as well, because I mean, I wouldn't be old enough to go to a regular school, so I'd be taken off to nursery, probably with my elder brother or one of my elder sisters. They would go to the school. Mum would go out and work, especially in the autumn, picking up the potatoes. And
you literally pull them out of the ground?
Yes, oh no, there would be a tractor turning up the potatoes, and they would actually lift them. All the people in the village would probably work in the farms, and they'd be picking up the potatoes, and that's what she would do in you know, the harvest season, and that would be part of a job. Then the older members of the family would pick the younger ones up from school, go back home. And by that time, Mum would be getting home about 5 o'clock-ish after a day in the fields, and then she'd be ready cooking for the family for the evening, and that would be her day. You know, really hard work.
Who looked after you while your mum was at work?
Well, I'd be, you know, probably...
When you were very small, say, when you were 6 months?
I don't know. I mean, that I don't know. I just remembered going to nursery school, you know, just prior to obviously going to primary school.
Can you remember, say, a birthday?
Nothing specifically, because birthdays are like most other days, you know. I mean, there wasn't the finance to, you know, have these wonderful birthday presents. But as I say, we didn't lack in many other things. I mean, there was lots of love and affection there.
Yeah, there must have been, but it must have been pretty tough as well. I mean,
I'm
there
sure.
must have been. It's interesting that you can't remember, you know, because probably there's quite a lot that's worth forgetting as well as good things that happened.
Yeah, I'm sure. But
Did your brothers and sisters look after you a lot?
oh yeah, I mean they would look after all the younger ones in the family.
Were you particularly close to one rather than the others? Or?
Yes, well, I think my eldest brother. I mean, when my dad died, he took over the role in the household of father, and I've got a great relationship with Andy, and he became the hero of the family, and still is. Even though you know I've made it as a player and as a manager, Andy will always remain the hero of the family when he took over Dad's role.
How did he react when you had to tell him about all the problems you're having with Arsenal?
No, he was always very supportive for you know.
On the particular that though, did he? Because he's someone you say in the book that he's somebody you always turn to for advice and could trust.
Yeah, I kept this one pretty close to my chest, and but Andy would ring up on regular basis, and he was really upset when Arsenal sacked me because he thought that, like I did, that I'd achieved so much there that until I was charged and a verdict being given, Arsenal should have stood by me.
How were you disciplined when you were small?
Usually by a leather strap. If you were naughty, just a little hit with a leather strap across the legs or across the bottom, and that was enough for Mum, you know, to tell us we're not doing things right.
When did you come into puberty? What age?
I would think when I was in Birmingham, and then I started even at 15 when I was in Scotland. Football. I mean, girls didn't even enter into the situation, and yeah, it was a football. I mean that.
So can you remember your first sexual experience?
Yes, but I want to keep that tucked away.
Why?
Well, I think it's a private. I mean, there's certain things in life I like to keep private, and that's one of them.
Right. And when you got to Birmingham, you were quite popular with the girls at that point, though.
Yeah, well, you then became a so-called mini star, a mini celebrity, that you were attached to a big famous football club, and you were one of the juniors. So just being saying you're an Aston Villa footballer, you know, in Birmingham, that was some celebrity status. And
you also were spectacularly good looking, even though
I didn't really
pictures of you. You're very handsome.
I didn't really particularly think about that at the time.
Really?
As I say, I mean, I don't think you think of that at that age.
But when you got to Chelsea, they had the gorgeous George Club, didn't they? Which is a girls' club of fans.
Yeah, it's no different then from it is now. I mean, if you're attracted
Ryan
to
Giggs
the
or whatever.
opposite sex, and you just enjoy it. I mean, you're single, and that was the swinging 60s, and down the King's Road, and here I was, you know, a young 19-year-old in Chelsea's first team, and a very exciting team. I mean, life was wonderful.
You could say supermodels are in the same situation, where how do they decide who to sleep with, who not to sleep with. But I mean, was that the situation you were in, and how did you deal with it?
No, I just dealt with it as best I could. I mean, I probably look more at them than their physical beauty. I mean, you know, I like to get to know people, and
so you didn't just sleep with everyone?
Oh,
and
no,
anyone?
No, it was difficult.
You played hard to get.
Yeah, I probably got that from doing all my contracts with all the managers in the past, like, you know.
Your brother Andy was obviously a big influence in your life, and he had a future as a goalkeeper.
Yeah, I mean, Andy was one of the best young goalkeepers around in the school teams at that age, but I think he had a very good opportunity. He would have had a very good opportunity of even going pro at that time, but again, he didn't have the opportunity. The family came first. He was the breadwinner, and he had to go out and earn money to help the rest of the family. So he took that on board, and I think Andy sacrificed maybe something that he would have secretly loved to try, and that was probably become a pro goalkeeper.
Do you think that his ambition, his thwarted ambition, was to some extent, inherited by you?
Probably, and probably Andy, who's so keen on my career, is probably seeing as maybe what he could have achieved.
He was keen on your career, was he?
Oh,
when you were small.
Oh yeah. I mean, Andy kept my scrapbook, for years, right from my schoolboy days to the local district team, and then the county team, and then the Scottish schoolboy team, and then joining Aston Villa. I mean, I've got a tremendous cuttings in my scrapbook, which Andy always kept. So I could see Andy really taking pleasure in seeing my career and probably thinking, well, maybe it could have been me.
One of the really interesting findings of social science is that outstanding achievers are much more likely to have lost a father before the age of 14 than normal. So, for example, a third of our prime ministers or a third of American presidents lost a father before 14, like Clinton did. The fact that you lost your father, or that you never had a father, means you have to be your own authority.
Right. I think it slowly evolved with me. I left school at 15, and I also left home at 15. But the basic values were in me before I left home. But then I grew up. I mean, then I had to grow up very, very quickly. I didn't have family there from the age of 15, you know, right throughout my life. I didn't have family there to fall back on.
You had to look after yourself.
Had to look after myself, and you've got to grow up very quickly.
You had to look after yourself as a child as well, to quite an extent.
Well, to a large extent, yeah.
If you lost a parent before the age of 14, it only leads to outstanding achievement if it's combined with a very reliable, consistent and strict, disciplined mother.
Well, I would say that's true. I mean, my mother was, she did give us values. She was a disciplined, she had to be. When you've got 7 kids around a house, you've got to have discipline, and you've got to have a certain amount of organisation. Probably somebody would say, you know, George Graham's football teams actually had these qualities that I probably inherited from my mother.
You have a reputation of having been very stern with your players. They talk about, you know, Gaddafi, Saddam.
Yeah. I hope in time, you know, I mean, I never get that close to my players. I always believed that when I went to work, I went to work. And when I switched off and became a sociable person, I was sociable. And I found, this was for me, not for other managers, but I just found that I wanted to have that divide between the players and myself. Don't give players the excuse that you're out and be one of them in the evening, and then the next morning when you're going to have to sort of wield the big stick, or you may have to do unpleasant things like drop a player. You know, you've been drinking with them the previous evening.
When you're talking about the managers who managed you, they're not actually really father figures. It's more that you've always been your own man.
Yeah, I mean, I always find it strange to read in newspapers about these players who say, I do it for my manager, and I do it for the coach. You know, and I always find that strange. I mean, I always thought, well, can't you do it for your own self-pride? I mean, surely that comes first.
And doesn't that go back to your childhood?
Well, it definitely does to mine. I just thought that everybody thought that they would give, you know, on a football pitch, or they would work their butt off, you know, for their own pride, for themselves.
In your book, you say, I wanted to be an artist, not an artisan, the man who created so-called boring Arsenal.
Well, I think we were an exciting machine. And I keep on saying this because the Arsenal Championship sides, the 2 sides that I had, we finished up top goal scorers. You know, which, you know, this is what it's all about. Is it playing exciting football? Is passing football as good as exciting football? I want to see exciting football. I want people to look excited when they're watching a game, not be bored to tears watching 18 consecutive passes in the middle of the pitch and not going anywhere. I've seen a lot of football abroad and a lot of boring football, but with very gifted technical players. We could have been more cavalier.
Exciting isn't immediately the word that springs to mind to many people.
Yeah, but you got to remember that Arsenal was always this boring tag, you know, boring Arsenal, or it was either lucky Arsenal. That was the other one. It was always lucky Arsenal.
But that's what I find a contradiction, is that you as a player were so creative and, if you like, on the side of, you know, of creativity, and yet, you know, a lot of people would say, you know, football died the day Arsenal won the double. You know?
Oh no, I think that's sad if anybody says that.
The system at Arsenal was such that, unlike at other clubs, there wasn't this paying some players hugely more than other players. So you must have been fantastic. You must have had very good relationships with these people to keep them, because they would be offering huge incentives to go other places.
Well, when I joined the club, there was this great discrepancy between the so-called stars and some of the other what I call regular first-team players. And you would get some of these players who obviously were not as talented, but they still did a very good job. Now, what you had to get was, you actually had to get the difference reduced, so that somebody in the first team was not earning 3 times as much as somebody who played 40 games a year. So what I try to do is I try to actually minimise the difference.
Now,
And
how did you manage to get, you must have had a tremendous, they must have really been devoted to you and really liked you perhaps, as well as admiring you, in order to, trusted you, to go
Yeah.
along with that.
Well, I think probably like's the wrong word. I think respected
Right.
and trust.
And of course it saved Arsenal
Yeah, I
a
mean-
fortune, because they weren't having to pay these people so much, A, and B, you were bringing on people from, you didn't buy a lot of very expensive, big name, flashy, I must be paid more than everyone else, prima donna players, did you?
Well, I think the word you've just says there sums it all up. Prima donna. I mean, prima donna to me means, a so-called talented, maybe star player who's not prepared to sweat.
And isn't this just perfect in terms of your childhood as well, though? Because you're in your family, presumably of 7, you couldn't afford to have somebody getting a lot more than somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, we all shared, isn't it?
Given your childhood, it's understandable then that if you were being shortchanged in any way, or if the system had changed, the amount of money players make today compared to when you played, those sorts of things would, be annoying to you. Suddenly some players are getting paid a hell of a lot of money, your feelings about that.
Well, I think I'm wise and worldly enough to accept now that money is paramount in a lot of people's lives, and is very, very important. And a lot of, it sort of like makes a lot of decisions for people, and people will do a lot of things for it.
You've been accused of taking bribes.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, to sum up...
just sum up what happened, very briefly.
Yeah, the scenario is that I met this agent, this foreign agent, who was unknown to me, and he would recommend foreign players. And he actually supplied players to Arsenal. Very, very successful. So therefore...
and his association with you led to him doing a lot, he as a result of having ever met you, became a great deal more successful, is that right?
He became very successful, not only in England, but also on the continent. So therefore, his business really took off. And this must have been the reason why he gave me an unsolicited gift.
And the first you knew about the sum of money, he just gave you some
Yeah, there was
envelopes and
yeah, I never
contained all
asked
the
for
money.
it, nor I even expected it. But it just came along and I accepted it.
How did the sacking come about?
I was absolutely gobsmacked when he told me that they were actually sacking me, and would I please leave as quickly as possible, as they were announcing it in 30 minutes. So I had 30 minutes to clean out my desk.
You literally went back to your office.
Yeah, I had to telephone my daughter and tell her not to come to the game that evening, because she's a great football fan.
Were you nearly crying, or were you
Well,
filled
not
with
crying.
rage?
I was just bitter.
You
I
felt
was
very
bitter.
angry.
I was very bitter that here was I having brought all that success.
Is there anything for you to feel guilty about?
Well, as I said in the book, fleeting greed, stupidity, naive. I would agree to all those. I will admit to all those. But now I've learned my lesson. I mean, if I could, in hindsight, if I could turn the clock back, I would have just walked away and said, no, thank you. I was stupid, yes, but the amount of publicity I've got, I mean, I was in the garden last week, digging up the garden, thinking there must be some bodies in here, because the publicity I've received is, I must have done something much, much worse, than what I've been accused of.
A lot of what you say comes back again and again to money. In your childhood, money was very short. One of the strongest ways that people could express real devotion to you would be to go and work all day in a field, by Andy going away and working and sending the money back.
Well, I mean...
That was the ultimate way you could, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, you just had to sort of try to earn something, so to clothe and feed us, and I would think that would have been extremely hard when you, what did I say, when you've got 7 children and you don't have a breadwinner, a husband to work for you, and for him to bring in a pay packet. It must have been extremely difficult and almost near impossible for her to manage. But yeah, of course it was important.